Before the Fellowship was the greatest story you've never heard. I'm Greg.
I'm Cameron.
I'm Dan.
And I'm your guest, Andy.
Join us as we read and react to the Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien. Last time we concluded chapter 18. As the north of Beleriand fell to Morgoth, 12 men held out in Dorthonion, including Barahir and his son Beren. Sauron took Tol Sirion and transformed it into an outpost for Morgoth. Morgoth captured many men and elves and released them back into Beleriand, hoping to sow more treachery. Men from the east came into Beleriand at Morgoth's call, and some ultimately betrayed Morgoth, siding with the Edain and the Eldar. Turgon embraced a group of Haladin who were brought to Gondolin by eagles, but Maegleen rejected them. Turgon sent emissaries into the west, seeking help from the Valar, but none reached Valinor. Morgoth attacked Heathlam, but Círdan helped to fight off the attacking armies. Today we begin chapter 19, which is found on page 162 of the second edition. Chapter 19, of Beren and Lúthien. Among the tales of sorrow and of ruin that come down to us from the darkness of those days, there are yet some in which amid weeping there is joy, and under the shadow of death, light that endures. And of these histories most fair, still in the ears of the elves, is the tale of Beren and Lúthien. Of their lives was made the Lay of Lúthien, release from bondage, which is the longest save one of the songs concerning the world of old. But here the tale is told in fewer words and without song. It has been told that Barahir would not forsake Dorthonion, and there Morgoth pursued him to the death, until at last there remained to him only 12 companions. Now the forest of Dorthonion rose southward into the mountainous moors, and in the east of those highlands there lay a lake, Tarn Ailuin, with wild heaths about it, and all that land was pathless and untamed, for even in the days of the long peace none had dwelt there. But the waters of Tarn Ainluin were held in reverence, for they were clear and blue by day, and by night were a mirror for the stars. And it was said that Melian herself had hallowed that water in days of old. Thither Barahir and his outlaws withdrew, and there made their lair. And Morgoth could not discover it. But the rumor of the deeds of Barahir and his companions went far and wide, and Morgoth commanded Sauron to find them and destroy them. Now among the companions of Barahir was Gorlim, son of Angrim. His wife was named Eilinel, and their love was great ere evil befell. But Gorlim, returning from the war upon the marches, found his house plundered and forsaken, and his wife gone. Whether slain or taken, he knew not. Then he fled to Barahir, and of his companions he was the most fierce and desperate. But doubt gnawed his heart, thinking that perhaps Eilinel was not dead. At times he would depart alone and secretly, and visit his house that still stood amid the fields and woods he had once possessed. And this became known to the servants of Morgoth. On a time of autumn, he came in the dusk of evening, and drawing near, he saw, as he thought, a light at the window. And coming warily, he looked within. There he saw Eilinel, and her face was worn with grief and hunger. And it seemed to him that he had heard her voice lamenting that he had forsaken her. But even as he cried aloud, the light was blown out in the wind. Wolves howled, and on his shoulders he felt suddenly the heavy hands of Sauron's hunters. Thus Gorlim was ensnared, and taking him to their camp, they tormented him, seeking to learn the hidings of Barahir and all his ways. But nothing would Gorlim tell. Then they promised him that he should be released and restored to Eilinel if he would yield. And being at last worn with pain and yearning for his wife, he faltered. Then straightway they brought him into the dreadful presence of Sauron. And Sauron said, I hear now that thou wouldst barter with me. What is thy price? And Gorlim answered that he should find Eilunel again, and with her be set free. For he thought that Eilunel also had been made captive. Then Sauron smiled, saying, That is a small price for so great a treachery. So shall it surely be. Say on. Now Gorlim would have drawn back, but daunted by the eyes of Sauron, he told at last all that he would know. Then Sauron laughed, and he mocked Gorlim, and revealed to him that he had only seen a phantom devised by wizardry to entrap him. For Eilunel was dead. Nonetheless, I will grant thy prayer, said Sauron, and thou shalt go to Eilunel and be set free of my service. Then he put him cruelly to death. In this way, the hiding of Badahir was revealed, and Morgoth drew his nets about it, and the orcs, coming in the still hours before dawn, surprised the men of Dorthonion and slew them all save one. For Beren, son of Badahir, had been sent by his father on a perilous errand to spy upon the ways of the enemy, and he was far afield when the lair was taken. But as he slept, benighted in the forest, he dreamed that carrion birds sat thick as leaves upon the bare trees beside a mere, and blood dripped from their beaks. Then Beren was aware in his dream of a form that came to him across the water, and it was a wraith of Gorlim. And it spoke to him, declaring his treachery and death, and bade him make haste to warn his father. Then Beren awoke and sped through the night and came back to the lair of the outlaws on the second morning. But as he drew near, the carrion birds rose from the ground and sat in the alder trees, besides Tarn Eiluin, and croaked in mockery. There Beren buried his father's bones, and raised a cairn of boulders above him, and swore upon it an oath of vengeance. First, therefore, he pursued the orcs that had slain his father and his kinsmen, and he found their camp by night at Revil's well above the fen of Serek. And because of his woodcraft, he came near to their fire unseen. There the captain made boast of his deeds, and he held up the hand of Badahir that he had cut off as a token for Sauron, that their mission was fulfilled. And the ring of Felagund was on that hand. Then Beren sprang up from behind a rock and slew the captain, and taking the hand and the ring, he escaped, being defended by fate. For the orcs were dismayed, and their arrows wild. Thereafter, for 4 years more, Beren wandered still upon Dorthonion, a solitary outlaw, but he became the friend of birds and beasts, and they aided him and did not betray him. And from that time forth he ate no flesh, nor slew any living thing that was not in the service of Morgoth. He did not fear death, but only captivity, and being bold and desperate, he escaped both death and bonds, and the deeds of lonely daring that he achieved were noised abroad throughout Beleriand, and the tale of them came even into Doriath. At length Morgoth set a price upon his head, no less than the price upon the head of Fingon, High King of the Noldor. But the orcs fled rather at the rumor of his approach than sought him out. Therefore an army was sent against him under the command of Sauron, and Sauron brought werewolves, fell beasts, inhabited by dreadful spirits that he had imprisoned in their bodies. All that land was now become filled with evil, and all clean things were departing from it. And Beren was pressed so hard that at last he was forced to flee from Dorthonion. In time of winter and snow, he forsook the land and grave of his father, and climbing into the high regions of Gorgoroth, the mountains of terror, he descried afar the land of Doriath. There it was put into his heart that he would go down into the hidden kingdom, where no mortal foot had yet trodden. Terrible was his southward journey. Sheer were the precipices of arid Gorgoroth, and beneath their feet were shadows that were laid before the rising of the moon. Beyond lay the wilderness of Dungortheb, where the sorcery of Sauron and the power of Melian came together, and horror and madness walked. There, spiders of the fell race of Ungoliant abode, spinning their unseen webs in which all living things were snared. And monsters wandered there that were born in the long dark before the sun, hunting silently with many eyes. No food for elves or men was there in that haunted land, but death only. That journey is not accounted least among the great deeds of Beren, but he spoke of it to no one after, lest the horror return into his mind. And none know how he found a way, and so came by paths that no man nor elf else ever dared to tread to the borders of Doriath. And he passed through the mazes that Melian wove about the kingdom of Thingol, even as she had foretold, for a great doom lay upon him. It is told in the Lay of Lúthien that Beren came stumbling into Doriath, gray and bowed as with many years of woe, so great had been the torment of the road. But wandering in the summer in the woods of Neldoreth, he came upon Lúthien, daughter of Thingol and Melian, at a time of evening under moonrise, as she danced upon the unfading grass in the glades beside Escalduin. Then all memory of his pain departed from him, and he fell into an enchantment. For Lúthien was the most beautiful of all the children of Ilúvatar. Blue was her raiment as the unclouded heaven, but her eyes were gray as the starlit evening. Her mantle was sewn with golden flowers, but her hair was dark as the shadows of twilight. As the light upon the leaves of trees, as the voice of clear waters, as the stars above the mists of the world, such was her glory and her loveliness, and in her face was a shining light. But she vanished from his sight, and he became dumb as one that is bound under a spell. And he strayed long in the woods, wild and wary as a beast, seeking for her. In his heart he called her Tinuviel, that signifies nightingale, daughter of twilight, in the great elven tongue. For he knew no other name for her, and he saw her afar as leaves in the wind of autumn, and in winter as a star upon a hill, but a chain was upon his limbs. There came a time near dawn on the eve of spring, and Lúthien danced upon a green hill, and suddenly she began to sing. Keen, heart-piercing was her song, as the song of the lark that rises from the gates of night and pours its voice among the dying stars, seeing the sun behind the walls of the world. And the song of Lúthien, released from the bonds of winter, and the frozen waters spoke, and flowers sprang from the cold earth where her feet had passed. Then the spell of silence fell from Beren, and he called to her, crying, Tinuviel, and the woods echoed the name. Then she halted in wonder and fled no more, and Beren came to her. But as she looked on him, doom fell upon her, and she loved him. Yet she slipped from his arms and vanished from his sight, even as the day was breaking. Then Beren lay upon the ground in a swoon, as one slain at once by bliss and grief, and he fell into asleep, as it were into an abyss of shadow. And waking, he was cold as stone, and his heart barren and forsaken. And wandering in mind, he groped as one that is stricken with sudden blindness, and seeks with hands to grasp the vanished light. Thus he began the payment of anguish for the fate that was laid on him, and in his fate Lúthien was caught, and being immortal, she shared in his mortality, and being free received his chain. and her anguish was greater than any other of the Aldaliae has known. Beyond his hope, she returned to him, where he sat in darkness, and long ago, in the hidden kingdom, she laid her hand in his. Thereafter, often she came to him, and they went in secret through the woods together from spring to summer. And no others of the children of Iluvatar have had joy so great, though the time was brief. But Dairon, the minstrel, also loved Lúthien, and he espied her meetings with Beren and betrayed them to Thingol. Then the king was filled with anger, for Lúthien he loved above all things, setting her above all the princes of the elves, whereas mortal men he did not even take into his service. Therefore he spoke in grief and amazement to Lúthien, but she would reveal nothing until he swore an oath to her that she would neither slay Beren nor imprison him. But he sent his servants to lay hands on him and lead him to Menegroth as a malefactor. And Lúthien, forestalling them, led Beren herself before the throne of Thingol, as if he were an honored guest. Then Thingol looked upon Beren in scorn and anger, but Melian was silent. "Who are you," said the king, "that come hither as a thief, and unbidden dare to approach my throne?" But Beren, being filled with dread, for the splendor of Menegroth and the majesty of Thingol were very great, answered nothing. Therefore Lúthien spoke and said, "He is Beren, son of Badahir, lord of men, mighty foe of Morgoth, the tale of whose deeds is become a song even among the elves." "Let Beren speak," said Thingol. "What would you hear, unhappy mortal? And for what cause have you left your own land to enter this, which is forbidden to such as you? Can you show reason why my power should not be laid on you in heavy punishment for your insolence and folly?" Then Beren, looking up, beheld the eyes of Lúthien, and his glance went also to the face of Melian, and it seemed to him that words were put into his mouth. Fear left him, and the pride of the eldest house of men returned to him, and he said, "My fate, O king, led me hither, through perils such as few even of the elves would dare. And here I have found what I sought, not indeed, but finding, I would possess forever. For it is above all gold and silver, and beyond all jewels. Neither rock nor steel, nor the fires of Morgoth, nor all the powers of the elf kingdoms shall keep me from the treasure that I desire. For Lúthien, your daughter, is the fairest of all the children of the world." Then silence fell upon the hall, for those that stood there were astounded and afraid, and they thought that Beren would be slain. But Thingol spoke slowly, saying, "Death you have earned with these words, and death you should find suddenly, had I not sworn an oath in haste, of which I repent, base-born mortal, who in the realm of Morgoth has learnt to creep in secret as his spies and thralls." Then Beren answered, "Death you can give me, earned or unearned, but the names I will not take from you of baseborn, nor spy, nor thrall. By the ring of Felagund that he gave to Badahir my father on the battlefield of the north, my house has not earned such names from any elf, be he king or no." His words were proud, and all eyes looked upon the ring, for he held it now aloft, and the green jewels gleamed there that the Noldor had devised in Valinor. For this ring was like two twin serpents, whose eyes were emeralds, and their heads met beneath a crown of golden flowers, that the one upheld and the other devoured. That was the badge of Finarfin and his house. Then Melian leaned to Thingol's side, and in whispered counsel bade him forego his wrath. "For not by you," she said, "shall Beren be slain, and far and free does his fate lead him in the end. Yet it is wound with yours. Take heed." But Thingol looked in silence upon Lúthien and thought in his heart, unhappy men, children of little lords and brief kings, shall such as these lay hands on you and yet live? Then breaking the silence, he said, I see the ring, son of Badahir, and I perceive that you are proud and deem yourself mighty. But a father's deeds, even had his service been rendered to me, avail not to win the daughter of Thingol and Melian. See now, I too desire a treasure that is withheld. For rock and steel and the fires of Morgoth keep the jewel that I would possess against all the powers of the elf kingdoms. Yet I hear you say that bonds such as these do not daunt you. Go your way, therefore. Bring to me in your hand a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown, and then, if she will, Lúthien may set her hand in yours. Then you shall have my jewel, and though the fate of Arda lie within the Silmarils, yet you shall hold me generous. Thus he wrought the doom of Doriath, and was ensnared within the curse of Mandos. And those that heard these words perceived that Thingol would save his oath, and yet send Beren to his death. For they knew that not all the power of the Noldor, before the siege was broken, had availed even to see from afar the shining Silmarils of Feanor. For they were set in the Iron Crown and treasured in Angband above all wealth, and Balrogs were about them, and countless swords and strong bars and unassailable walls, and the dark majesty of Morgoth. In summary, the 12 outlaws in Dorthonion fight for survival. Sauron deceives Gorlim and convinces him to betray his companions. Beren alone survives. After avenging his father and reclaiming his father's ring, he wanders into the wilderness for 4 years, eventually making his way through the Girdle of Melian into Doriath. He encounters Melian's daughter, Lúthien. The two grow in friendship, joy, and love. A jealous Sindar elf tells Thingol about Beren, enraging him. Lúthien brings Beren to Thingol as a guest, but the king threatens to punish Beren for entering Doriath. Beren declares his desire for Lúthien, and Thingol makes a deal with him. If Beren retrieves a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown, he may have Lúthien's hand. So good.
So good.
Death you have earned with these words, and death you should find subtly, had I not sworn an oath in haste. I'm pretty sure those were the words of my father-in-law when I asked him for my wife's
I'm gonna take those words and use them.
I definitely relate to that. Like,
how dare you say you desire my daughter?
I know what he's going through.
Well, on that note, I know it's kind of skipping ahead, but what I love about what her father says is that bring me the Silmaril from Morgoth's crown, and though the fate of Arda lie within the Silmarils, you shall hold me generous for giving you my daughter's hand. You know, even if you give me a Silmaril, I'll be generous with that trade. That's such an honorable thing to say.
Yeah, this is so much happened in this like fairly brief reading.
Yeah.
We hear the end of the Dorthonion 12.
Yeah, Gorlim.
Which is just Gorlim. I noticed in the last reading they give him a title. They call him Gorlim the Unhappy. And now we understand why he's so unhappy.
Interesting.
Why is he unhappy? I missed that.
He was the one where his wife was captured and.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah, he was tricked.
Yeah, he was tricked by Sauron into betraying.
So horrible. That was like really
terrible. It's so dark.
It's funny.
It made Morgoth look not as bad. Like this, what Sauron did in this case.
It was very I feel like modern day storytelling has a lot of that kind of trope in it, like horror stories where you're seeing something. Did you ever see that horrible like wolf movie, Grey?
No.
Oh, with Liam Neeson?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so depressing.
It's a moment where he has this moment with his daughter. His daughter's above him, and then it turns out being a wolf that's eating him. But it's like,
Oh my god.
it's like really savage and emotional. But that's what this was like. But
Gorlim, he's played by Liam Neeson for sure.
Yeah.
there's another trope.
For
There's
sure.
another trope that they did, that they use in films all the time, where he eventually says, "Nevertheless, I will grant you thy
Oh,
prayer."
yeah.
And then it's like,
You will
I just
join
imagine
her
him like slitting
when
his
she's dead.
throat. Like,
Yeah.
they do that all the time in
Yeah, they do.
movies.
They
That-
do
that-
Like, I'm
happens
pretty
in
sure, what's
Dune.
his name? Thanos does it to someone,
Sorry.
doesn't he? You just do spoilers?
No, I said Dune, the movie Dune. With
Oh,
the book.
yeah.
Dr. Yui.
Oh, yeah.
Basically- yeah, it's like the exact same thing of
yeah.
betrayal and expecting that his wife is going to be okay, and actually, of course, she's not.
I want to go back even a little bit further. I feel like this is a key point for me and why I like the Silmarillion so much. This very first paragraph of the chapter, it says, "Among the tales of sorrow and ruin that come down, there are yet some in which amid weeping there is joy, and under the shadow of death, light that endures." I think that's what I love about this story and other stories in the Silmarillion, that are all in the context of this great conflict, and there's terrible things happening left and right, but there's still these moments of great heroism and beauty and goodness, and I think that's why it's bearable to read all the darkness.
Yeah.
I'm gonna anger some people here with this opinion, but I've now read the book Mistborn twice by Brandon Sanderson. It's been recommended to me a lot, and I didn't like it the first time, and I allowed someone to convince me to read it again, and I liked it even less the second time. And it's the main reason why is because it's just the darkness.
Yeah.
There isn't any like redeeming hope or light in it. It's just like the beginning of it is like a slave being taken by the plantation owner to be raped. And then it just like goes downhill from there. And there's never like really, even the hero is kind of he's a thief, which is kind of popular, having like the dark heroes now, but there's like true heroism in the story of Beren. And
Well, it's like that line, the shadow of death, right? It's like, it reminds me of Psalm 23, right? Like, though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you walk with me, right? And it reminds me of like this veil of tears, right? Where it's just like, or in G.K. Chesterton's Ballad of the White Horse, where he says like, I'm not going to say that everything's good. Like, actually, the sea is rising higher and higher. But like, yeah, I still call you to march with me and into this battle. Yeah, I love that kind of, like you said, like there's still joy there. There's still light that pierces through. That's one of my favorite moments in the Return of the King is when the light pierces through. Do they have like a glimpse in I'm trying to think if it's the Fire of Galadriel or just in Mordor. Don't they have like a glimpse of light at one point?
Well, there's light obviously coming over the hill when he says, "Look to the west."
I'm thinking of like Frodo and Sam, like in Mordor.
Yeah, they're like,
there's like
he has the
glance of
file
sun.
against Shelob.
Yeah.
No, but I think there's
another one. Yeah,
I think he's just laying. I don't think there's actually light, but he's remembering the Shire. Like he's just like
right.
There's like trying to remember like the
that too. I think there's another time. It might not actually be in the movie. It might be in the book where they literally like have just like this glimpse of light.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, in the when they're at the base of the mountain, right?
Yes.
And it's like a hopeless moment, but they get this little glimpse of light through the clouds.
It's a beautiful moment. Yeah, I love that.
The other one that's like that from Return of the King is when Gandalf rides out. When the Nazgul are like coming to Minas Tirith, and he like
with his lightsaber shining.
Yeah, with his.
I can hear the music. I can hear it right now. Like, oh my gosh, so good.
Anyway,
Magneto riding with his lightsaber.
Magneto, oh my gosh.
Hey, did you guys notice? So when Sauron's talking to Gorlim, Gorlim is daunted by the eyes of Sauron, and it makes me think of who Sauron is, and eventually he becomes, the lidless eye that's haunting people's dreams. In the Lord of the Rings, the lidless eye. But yeah, it's just interesting that even here, you just look at his face and you just can't help but be daunted by his stare.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, he's
Thanks for
pretty
pointing it
evil.
out.
He's really evil.
What's the deal with his ring? I haven't been following along with every bit because Aragorn eventually gets that ring, right? I think he
The Ring of Felagund?
Yeah, the ring of, and at that point they call it the ring of Barahir.
Oh yeah.
It's the two serpents.
Yeah, the two serpents. Yeah, I didn't. Honestly, I don't think I recall it being mentioned before this reading, but it's like really emphasized in this.
Yeah,
one.
like how did he get it?
And I looked it up, and it is it eventually makes its way to Elrond and then to Aragorn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's. I mean, in Arda, it's listed as the Ring of Barahir.
It was in reward for saving Finrod's life in the Dagor Bragollach.
Got it. Nice.
Maybe we did read about that. I think
that
we
was like just recently, maybe
it was
last
recent.
reading.
Yeah.
Wow.
Reading before.
Up.
Yeah.
Two serpents beneath a crown of flowers, upheld by one of the serpents and devoured by the other.
You can buy it for like
crazy
$200.
that, like when he's building this world, he's building jewelry as well.
Jewelry.
Like detailed jewelry. It's like amazing.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that Sauron just makes you feel like he's more evil than Morgoth? Just what he does?
Well,
I mean, okay, so
go ahead.
We have Gorlim and just how terrible that was. But then later, the next page, it says, Sauron brought werewolves, fell beasts inhabited by dreadful spirits that he had imprisoned in their bodies. You would think Morgoth would be like, okay, Sauron, just, okay, chill. You don't need to.
Yeah. He's like, he wants a promotion. He wants a promotion. It's like, look, dude, you're already at the top. Like, the only way to get further is by killing me. And this ain't Star Wars. So it's not going to work like that. Although, like, I feel the same way about Thrawn talking about Star Wars. In Star Wars, there's this really intelligent, like, evil villain called Thrawn. And he seems more evil than the big villains in there. And he's only a lieutenant. So
you know what it is? Point. Okay, Dostoevsky in The Brothers Karamazov has this idea of man's evil is not just like an animal is suffering and that's really sad, or that a tornado comes and wrecks a house and that's really sad, but it's a kind of artful evil that it takes intelligence. And only a man can be that evil.
I was going to say the same thing of like, Morgoth may have been more evil. Like maybe the master was greater than the servant. But like in this book, you see Sauron actually like getting under the skin and into the heart of these men in a way that is so twisted and evil. It's like, to me, it speaks of like the drama of free will and men and life, like that like there's meaning to this evil because men have free will and there's like there's tragedy and horror in this twisted way that he's working.
Yeah. You know what I was thinking? Well, I've heard a similar comment. It wasn't from Dostoevsky, that was from Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh, very similar. Yeah.
In like a bit, he was saying like, just like one of the darkest things that people do is just drop their trash on the floor after a movie ends at the movie theater.
Yeah, that's
like
pretty dark.
You know someone has to clean that up and he just dropped it there.
Or you don't return your car in the parking lot at Walmart. You just leave it by your car and you just check no one's around. Like, I don't do that. Like, I always park next to it.
Right. Exactly. I do too, yeah. No, and it's a joke, but it's like the seeds of like really dark actions are in that. Like, that's like a very benign expression.
We referenced this quote a couple episodes ago, and it's fitting for what we're just talking about. It's from Clive, our good friend Clive.
Whoa, Staples?
Yeah, Mr. Clive Staples. Mr.
Lewis.
Staples.
Love it.
He says, it is a serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses. To remember that the dullest, most uninteresting person you can talk to may one day be a creature which if you saw it now, you'd be strongly tempted to worship, or else a horror and a corruption such as you now meet, if at all, only in a nightmare.
Yeah.
All day long, we are in some degree helping each other to one of the other of these destinations. It is in the light of these overwhelming possibilities, it is with the awe and the circumspection proper to them that we should conduct all our dealings with one another, all friendships, all loves, all play, all politics. There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. And then he ends by saying, it is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit, immortal horrors or everlasting splendors.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
He's so good. I mean, that's so love good. Lewis.
Tolkien
is amazing, and Lewis is amazing. This isn't a Tolkien v. Lewis thing.
Well, Tolkien like makes it real with an elf and an orc. Like, it's a great
right. And I do think, Cameron, to your point, I think we're seeing a specific time where Sauron is really acting in such an evil manner, but we're hearing it in more detail than the things that Morgoth does.
Yeah, we don't hear how Morgoth twists people in Angband. Yeah,
we hear that he has done that, and so I mean, he obviously has done really evil. Well, okay, we talked about the darkness for some time. How about like the most beautiful love story ever written?
Yeah,
that is beautiful. I was thinking.
Are you talking about Titanic again?
Exactly.
Titanic.
Okay, I was looking ahead a little bit. There's definitely a parallel to the heart of the sea is like the jewel, right?
Yeah.
Getting thrown into the ocean.
Never let
That's
go.
Spoiler alert. Yeah. But it's funny.
Oh, there's a ring. Doesn't she have a ring?
Probably.
Is it a jewel?
No,
there's a jewel
like
around her neck when she's 120 years old.
Yeah.
I forget. There's some kind of jewel.
We'll get there.
There's so many connections.
And it was made by
one of your
Tolkien.
French girls.
Plot twist.
Yeah, I loved the love story.
So the funny thing is, if you remember way back when, Thingol had a very similar story in meeting Melian.
That.
Yeah.
He like runs into Melian in the woods, and I think in their
Doesn't
story,
she like make flowers grow too? Is it Melian or is that someone else?
I think
Vanna?
that's
Vanna. Yavanna.
But I mean, he's like literally stuck there staring at her for centuries as like the world, like the stars.
So it runs in the family, right?
Yeah. But
it makes sense.
It's kind of funny that there's so little pity for this story. Like he is a parallel to Beren because he's like a lower being than Melian. She's a Maya and he's just an elf.
Jeez.
And then Beren's like the
right.
man.
Yeah. Good point.
But it's funny. He just has he's forgotten. He's old. He's just forgotten what it was like to be young.
Yeah. I mean,
man.
It's like the parable, right? Where the person who's forgiven turns around and demands.
Like
we
have a limit on how much Catholic stuff we can say.
Oh, sorry. That's just the Bible.
Whenever you say something Catholic, you have to say something.
We're not saying Catholic. We're saying Christian now. So
it's fine. You have to say something Protestant now, and then materialistic, and then
and then
Muslim or something. I don't know.
Oh, it's funny. Well,
how can a good God allow Thingol
to... She is an image of Our Lady. You want me to read it? Blue was your raiment as the unclouded heaven. Yeah, let's move on. We'll move on.
Well, what I was thinking with that, I mean, no, it's true. I mean, what I was thinking was, I think I've heard a lot of people recently just keep on emphasizing how Tolkien's wife was like an inspiration for the Beren and Lúthien love story, like their love story was, and I think it's true. But as we were reading this, I was like, in some ways, it's that like plays it. That kind of short sells some things, I think, because I'm sure their love story was beautiful, like Tolkien and his wife, but like I think that love story, and maybe speaking for myself too, like it can point to a higher reality. Like when you experience that, there's like a way in which like the story of Beren and Lúthien it's almost like he remembers the story of Beren and Lúthien, which is almost more true and more amazing than his own love story, but his own love story helps him to remember this, if that makes sense. That's why I think of it. I just think it's like I doubt that his love story was as exciting as this, right? Like,
I mean, she brings springtime. Like,
yeah,
like she makes like
literally.
the ice melt and stuff. Like,
Yeah.
she,
Does that make sense though? Like,
yeah,
It
I get what you're
doesn't
saying, yeah.
like every man's like bride like makes ice melt and brings springtime. Like
That's true.
not literally.
And then every woman,
Not literally though.
every woman who I've ever
No,
looked
but I mean-
at, doom falls upon them.
Doom falls upon them.
Doom.
Okay,
When-
wait.
Wrapped
Can we
up
stop
in a-
there
When you
for one
fall in
second?
love with me, doom will fall upon you.
I was thinking, like, Beren, he's just been in battle for years and then wandering the wilderness for years. He must have forgotten after seeing her how badly he reeked and that he hasn't shaven in like 6 years. He looks like Tom Hanks in Castaway and
I'm
smells
sure he's
terrible.
thinking all of this. Like,
And
Well, because the
But he's
line
remembering
is,
himself.
but
He
she
hasn't looked in the
vanished
mirror.
from his sight.
He hasn't seen himself in a mirror in quite some time. So he's remembering himself as like this strapping, handsome lad. And she's like, whoa, you need to clean up before we can talk anymore.
Does he? Is that true? Because I'm trying. It was almost like she like fell in love with him immediately.
No, she did.
Yeah, wait. Because that is kind of crazy that she just like
No, she didn't fall in love with him immediately.
she got scared at first, but then she
Yeah, it wasn't love at first sight for her. It was second sight,
love at second sight.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, the bottom of 165.
Or she like ran away from
It
him.
was after he was in that spell, and then he
Oh.
seeks her again,
Yes.
When he was being
and
silent.
then Doom falls upon her, which we've all been there.
Doom.
Yeah.
We've all been there. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
As slain by bliss and grief.
Mm.
It's so intense.
Jeez.
I do think
something. Here's something I want to point out is that it notes that in his fate, Lúthien was caught, and being immortal, she shared in his mortality. So
Yeah.
that's actually gonna happen later.
Right.
It's
Right.
talking about something that's going to happen. It's kind of a prophecy.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I was wondering because they seem to gloss over it pretty quick, and I know that that's a connection to a story that we hear again in the Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
Which one?
Arwen and what's his face?
Vigo.
Aragorn.
Yeah,
Viggo.
that's it, Viggo.
Liv Tyler.
Because that's her whole like dilemma. Like, do I do
Mhm.
it? Don't I do it? Her dad's like, don't do it.
Never let go.
Does he call her to? This is what's bugging me. Does he call her Tenuviel in the book or in the movie?
Gosh, that sounds so familiar to me. I don't
Daughter
know.
of Tenuviel, he
Daughter
says.
of Tenuviel. Yes.
That's what he calls it. Okay.
Yeah.
That's right.
He calls
Okay.
Arwen that, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Something
Yeah,
like Lady of Tenuviel or Daughter of Tenuviel, something like that.
Love that.
Because the other elves, as they're talking about it, or at least maybe it's Papa Elf and Daughter Elf, as he's warning her. I think he talks about this story. I think is that right? Am I remembering that correctly?
I think so.
Something like that.
I've
There's a
recently been
direct
watching-
comparison in the Lord of the Rings.
I've recently watched some videos about Lord of the Rings, and it's gotten me more excited, but also more confused because it's been mentioning the differences between the movie and the books. I'm like, I gotta go read the books because I definitely I love the movies, love the books, but the movies have started to influence my like view of the story, such that I forget key things from the books, and I really got to go back and read those. So
Have you listened to the audiobooks by Andy Serkis? Yeah,
no, I've heard
They
about
are
like an excerpt, and
phenomenal.
so good.
They are phenomenal. They are excellent, and I highly recommend it. But it will confuse your like what was a movie and what wasn't again. 'Cause he does accents for every character, and he emulates the characters from the movie. So he does Gandalf. He does a character Gollum. He does all of the hobbits. He does all of the dwarves.
I gotta listen to this whole thing. I've listened to
It's
him
incredible.
do like a small excerpt, and he was amazing. I love his voice. He's so good.
Yeah, he's phenomenal.
I wanted to at least highlight this very lot. This is a key part of the story is that Thingol makes this deal with Beren, get me a Silmaril, and I'll give you Lúthien. And
Yeah,
what's interesting to me about that is Thingol doesn't really care about the Silmarils. Like he's not Noldor. He's not a son of Fëanor. So he doesn't really. He's only heard of them. Even he hasn't seen them ever. but he's like, so I think for him, the key thing that he's trying to present is an impossible task.
Yeah.
Like he like just loathes Beren so much that he wants to set him up to die.
Has this happened already in the story? It just seems really familiar. Or it could be from another film or a book that I've read. But the idea of an impossible task that then the person... Oh, yeah, it's John Wick. Oops. It's John Wick.
It's what our listeners must be thinking, like,
these schlebs.
They're listing like 20 different stories that have the same plot point off the top of their head.
Well, I mean, maybe Tolkien was the inspiration for that. Like, he synthesized.
You think he's lying? Sorry, you think he's lying when he says, "I desire a treasure that is withheld, for rock and steel and the fires of Morgoth keep the jewel that I would possess."
No, but like you said earlier, it's like he wants to set it really high. And even if you pass this, I'm going to be making an act of generosity.
I guess in a certain sense, I mean, it does say that it specifically says for Lúthien, he loved above all things on 166. So if that's true, which that's narrative, that's not dialogue. Like it's Tolkien is telling us that's who he loves above all things. It would make sense for him to lie and say he wants the Silmarils above all things,
or just mention the thing second place thing.
Right, he's trying to find like something that is comparable in value, but maybe not. I mean, he says, go
to Timbuktu and get me a 4-leaf clover on a whatever. It'd be like, you're never gonna do this.
Yeah, we could talk forever about this. One other little part, I'm curious what you guys think about this, but this is on bottom of 166 when Thingol starts yelling at Beren.
Oh yeah,
he kind of like he's like a lowly mortal, But then it says, it seemed to him that words were put into his mouth. Fear left him, and the pride of the eldest house of men returned to him. Have you guys had that experience where you just like these aren't my words? Like it just came, and here it is.
Yeah,
like it's usually when I feel very weak.
Yeah.
And like I don't know what to say, and I feel stupid. That's usually when it happens.
Yeah. Maybe that's a quality of men that we share, like as like mankind, I mean, like men and women versus elves. Maybe they don't have that kind of inspiration to just like fight for survival and just, like the stirring inside that pushes you beyond what you think you're capable of.
Pride of men, whatever that is, yeah.
Well,
great.
I mean, we're maybe a quarter of the way through this, or a fifth of the way through the story of Beren and Lúthien, so we got a lot more to talk about.
We didn't say that we just passed the halfway mark of the book as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
good job.
So definitely. If you have thoughts to share, shoot us an email. I know this is a lot of people's favorite part of the book, so we're gonna try to take our time through it. Hence the longer episode, but. Come join the discussion on Discord or shoot us an email or something. So if you like what you hear, go ahead and rate us 3 Silmarils out of 3. If you really like what you hear, fetch a Silmaril from the crown of Morgoth and bring it to me. And then I'll know for sure that you like what you hear. Follow us everywhere Before the Fellowship. Join the discussion on Discord, as I said, and send any comments or questions to beforethefellowship@gmail.com. Join us next week as we read and react to the greatest story you've never heard, The Silmarillion by J.R.R. Tolkien.